everyone, Alec here and welcome to the workshop. I've always had a bit of a problem with loading and unloading large parts onto my lathe. Being a one-man band in the workshop, usually things are too heavy and I have to wait for someone else to be around to give me a lift. So I've always fancied the idea of having some kind of jib crane above the machine that can help me with that. But of course it can't be any old modern jib crane, otherwise I'd have done it by now. So it wasn't until a recent trip to the Slate Museum in Llanberis, North Wales, where I saw the perfect crane for the job. And using this collection of steel and the forge at the back, which is just getting hot, and a variety of traditional techniques and tools, I'm going to be replicating that exact crane in a slightly smaller scale to be useful here. And I hope you enjoy the process. I started with the back upright of the crane, and this piece is the round tenon, which is going to be the pivot point at the bottom. On the other end I'm going to do another one for the top part, and that's going to be a larger diameter because that's going to be taking all the weight.
Before I can forge the large tenon, the small tenon needs to cool down. So it's time to start on the main boom by bending the hoop section. This unusual design was one of the things that drew me originally to this particular crane. I assume that once upon a time a four-wheel trolley or something similar once rolled up and down this hooped section.
Right, now this is all one nice forged lump together. That's our hoop piece finished. But I need to fire weld it to this bar to form the top bar of the crane. So I need to do a scarf joint on this end and a scarf joint here. But before we can do that, I need to forge a tenon on the end of this, because it'll be a lot easier to do that before it's one long piece.
I didn't end up forging the tenon at this stage, as I realised I'd destroy it while prepping the other end for the weld. I am here, however, upsetting the bar in readiness for the tenon. Lots of extra mass here makes for a really strong joint, and is common in other forge works such as gates. With that done, I can flip it round and upset the other end, ready for the weld. Unlike more modern forms of welding, there is no filler material in forge welding, so in order to compensate for the inevitable loss of material during the process, we have to start with more mass than is needed in the final part. This is achieved here by upsetting and forging a scarf. In an earlier part of the video, before I bent the hoop section, you could see me folding the small end over first. and this is another way of adding extra material to a weld area.
So we forged out the basic shapes for the main boom components. This is going to be the heel bar end that goes up against the wall. This will eventually be the hoop that carries the trolley. I made the scarf joints on each end, and I'm going to weld these two together now, like so, to make up the main boom. Now it's a case of getting these up to welding heat at the same time, bringing them to the anvil and welding them together.
Now, I'm not entirely convinced that this was the exact method that the main boom on the Llanberis crane was forged. I expect that was probably made out of one piece and forged out on largish hammers and split to produce the hoop part. But for me, working on this scale, building the boom up out of multiple pieces fire welded together just made an awful lot more sense. And as a method, it's just as historically valid. I mean, there's no reason to say why a crane like the Llanberis crane couldn't have been made like that. I mean, fire welding large parts together is as old as ironworking itself, so who knows, but that's just my hunch. Other than the main boom, the construction and joinery of the rest of the crane is going to be exactly the same.
So now the joint is done, the main boom is completely together. While this area is still hot, I'm taking the opportunity to punch a hole, which is where the eventual brace will be riveted in. And there's our chip. Beautiful. A little bit more. Lovely. So we're back on the main upright part of the crane now, the spine, the back style if you like, and I'm just punching a hole for the tenon for the crossboom, which will fit in there. I've not yet forged the tenon, but I'm going to punch the hole first. It's easier to fit a tenon to a hole than it is a hole to a tenon. I'm just taking a drift, widen that hole up, and we'll get a thicker tenon in there, a bit more strength.
Back onto the tenon now, which is arguably the most important joint in the structure. Because of the extra mass I upset into it before, I can get a much larger tenon with larger shoulders than would have been previously possible with this parent section. This adds a lot of extra strength and rigidity to the crane.
That's the first two major pieces put together. The next one is a nice arch brace, which is going to go in here, and then a ring which is going to rivet in 3 points, to add a load of more rigidity, and the original had one, so we're going to do that. I'm really excited about how this is coming together. I think it's going to look really cool when it's done.
There was only really one way to make this brace. It had to be hand bent because it's not a consistent radius. As it drops down, it opens up, if that makes sense. I considered using a constant radius because then this part would be very easy to bend in the rollers. However, I think this way looks nicer and is more in keeping to the original that I'm basing this crane off of. As you can see, I started by laying out the existing parts and sketching out my brace in chalk. I can then use this line to calculate the amount of steel that I need, and also as a pattern to follow as I'm progressively making the bend using 8 to 10 inch long heats.
So I couldn't resist a little mock-up now that the major parts have been finished. I've got this clamped together temporarily just to show you how it's going to swing in practice. So we obviously got a pivot point set down in the bottom, and then there'll be a similar one wall mounted on the top, and it will swing over the lathe and out into the workshop on those. And then these parallel bars here will have a little 4-wheel trolley that will slide up and down to have a small block and tackle or some kind of pulley set up hanging underneath it. I'm going to leave the video here. This is unfortunately all the time I have to work on this project today, and I hope you'll join me next time when I forge the ring, which is a video in itself to be honest, and finish the assembly. We've got lots of riveting, the tenon to close up, and obviously hang it on the wall and turn it into a functioning crane. So I hope you'll join me then. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.